right, hello, wine-drinking people. Time for more of what I've had to drink yesterday. And what happened, my Australian accent just all of a sudden came out. Good night, mate. And that's what happens whenever our good friend Matt Lane is around. And let me tell you, man, what a wealth of information he is. Glad to see him landing at one of the top properties in the Barossa. We first met when he was working for Penfolds. And this guy, like I said, just a wealth of knowledge, not only about wines, but about other stuff, the vineyards, the history, and just like I said, I mean, just a pleasure to listen to talking. Man, Matt can talk, man. He laid it out there for these people, our 24 people at our Torbreck tasting in the back room. And this winery, created by David Powell in the early 90s, you know, he was part of the boom that happened in Australia, and all these labels started coming over to the U.S., and a lot of critics were scoring these wines very high, and the market just got saturated with wines in that $50 to $100 price range, and in 2008 when the market crashed. Well, the economy in Australia, when the dollar became so strong, it just didn't make sense for a lot of them to export their wines anymore. They would rather keep them in Australia rather than lose the exchange that they were getting on the dollar. And today things are getting a little bit better, you know, and Torbreck is one of the few wineries that has weathered the storm. And even though David Powell is no longer there, they've been through ownership changes, and the focus of this label today is around the vineyard sources where they get their fruit from. You know, some of the oldest Semillon in the world, oldest vines, is in the Barossa Valley in Austria. Some of the oldest Grenache vines, some of the oldest Mourvedre wines, some of the oldest Shiraz vines, yes, all located in the Barossa Valley in Australia. When I say old vines, of course, they've been making wine longer in parts of Europe, but vines that are still living, that are on their own rootstock, they've not been Frankenstein, because Frankenstein vines don't, you know, when they put a rootstock and they put a specific clone varietal on the rootstock, the rootstock's meant to resist phylloxera and to work with that soil type. But when you have a natural plant that's growing on its own rootstock, it can live a lot longer and produce for great grapes for wine a lot longer. And that's what these guys have got, some of the greatest vineyard sites throughout the Barossa Valley. And these guys make about 50,000 cases of wine, but I would say 30% of that probably is in the woodcutters line, and a lot of their small production, higher-end wines are very small production. The woodcutters, like I said, this is their entry level, and the Semillon, it's found a natural home in the Barossa Valley. It was one of the early white grapes planted by the first settlers 160 years ago, and this wine, very low-yielding old Semillon vines. You get a nice amount of candied fruit here, some honeyed almond notes as well, and even on the third day, this wine's still drinking nicely. I couldn't get to my notes to finish things off. On the second day, I kept several of these wines for 3 days, and still very fresh. This is a great example of Semillon, not just from Australia, but from anywhere. All right, the Torbreck Vintners Reserve Cuvée Juveniles. Juveniles is a cult Parisian bar and run by an enigmatic expat from England, an Englishman, and Tim Johnson, and he's in Paris more than the last 20 years. He's been promoting the Rhone Valley and its wines, and what an honor to have him ask Torbreck to make a cuvée for him. And this wine, Beaujolais style, we served it a little bit cold. It went beautifully with Oliver Saucy's mixed meat pasta dish, man. Just fantastic pairing, really bright fruit, some nice floral notes, wonderful concentration, and that chill really helped to freshen things up, and you know, it's got a little bit of acidity at the end and really make it go down smooth. Very good juice, the Cuvinales Unoaked GSM. All right, the Stedding GSM, this one's got a little peppery spice to it, and that was the vintage 2011, the Grenache Mataro and Shiraz blend, a classic berry pie notes, some wild herbs and floral notes, and really nice balance in all of these wines, even though the alcohol is a little high. And you know, to get phenolic ripeness in the Barossa, you have to pick the grapes at a higher sugar level most of the time. The Torbreck Struy up next, and this is from the Eden Valley, which is a little cooler, a little higher altitude vineyard here, and 44-year-old vines here. And then they've got some 80-year-old vines in there as well, aged for 18 months, and a combination of new and old French oak. And this wine has got a lovely bouquet to it, dark plum and cherry fruit, violet floral notes, dark chocolate, spices, and really thick and chewy on the tongue, but ripe round tan as these 2012s, a really nice vintage, showcasing a lot of fruit. And chunky, but nice freshness at the end, the cocoa powder and earth and spice notes, an excellent example of a GSM blend. All right, I'm sorry, the Shiraz. The Shrui is just Shiraz, not GSM. All right, the Factor Shiraz up next. We had two vintages of Factor, the 12 and the 6, and it's 100% old vine Shiraz from the Greenock sub-region of Barossa. Greenock Creek, one of my favorite wineries from this region. This wine region produces outstanding Shiraz, really thick and multi-layered, that cherry liqueur-like fruit, milk chocolate, sweet herbs, floral notes, really beautiful. Even on the third day, this 2012, wow, what a great vintage this is. Lots of tannins, but lots of everything else, lots of fruit, chocolate, espresso, that perfumed floral nuance coming out at the end. This wine needs time, but everything in proportion. Most excellent juice. The 2006 out of Magnum, maybe not quite as big and not quite as brash as the 2012, but it did have a little bit more time. 6 years in the bottle, kind of smoked meaty aromas coming out, a bit of an evolution showing here on the nose, and some dark earth and forest floor notes. Smooth berry and plum fruit, though, still on the tongue, softening tannins here, and a nice array of spice and that floral note, some cocoa coming out at the end. Excellent juice. I like the 12 a little bit better, but the 6 was excellent as well. The 12 Run Rig and 7 Run Rig, we had 7 out of Magnum. The Run Rig is, this is their top wine. This is the first wine that they started making, and wow, it is a balance of power and elegance. Wonderfully aromatic. This wine is so rich and concentrated, this 2012, and wow, just big bouquet, blackberry, smoky, toasty oak, really ripe and lush on the palate, and the tan is just so smooth and round, though. This wine, even though you can drink today, this is a wine you want to hold on to. We've got some very old vintages of Run Rig here, 2001, 2002, and those are drinking at their peak. And we still had a 98, one of my favorite vintages of all time, but this 2012 could make it there at some point. Most excellent juice. This winer's got more 99-point scores than any wine in the history of winedom. The 07, still very youthful, that lovely dark cherry liqueur-like fruit, dark plum, hints of toasty spice, black licorice, espresso, cocoa notes, really lovely intensity, and a little bit more complex because it's got a little bit of age to it, not quite as brash and fruity, and that lovely spice and earth lasting through the finish there. Most excellent juice. All right, the Les Amis killer, and probably my favorite wine of the night. This is their unique single vineyard old vine Grenache, which, wow, the nose on this wine, just lovely perfume, wildflowers, mixed berry pie, Chinese 5-spice, even more and more coming out as this wine opens. Just silky smooth on the palate. This 2010, wonderful firm hand of acidity. This is killer juice. One of the hardest wines to come by. They make about 700 cases of the Les Amis. The pick, also very small. Maybe that was a 700 case one. 700 6-packs, that is. This is a tiny parcel of really old vine Mataro, Mourvedre, 0.5 tons per acre. Wow. And the nose on this wine, violets, blackberries, blueberries, violets, florals, a big, voluminous on the palate. This wine just is a little monster, the 2012. This wine needed a day to open up, like aromas of earth, crushed rock, really intense, but still very lovely balance, long layered finish, most excellent juice. And then a little special treat, the Boothie, which some people didn't like this, but man, this wine to me is a textbook dead ringer for Muscat Baume de Venise. Lovely kind of floral aromatic bouquet, some lovely white peach fruit, and almost a little bit of a spritz to it, and maybe a little light on the acidity, but out of half bottles, I thought this wine was drinking beautifully and probably went brilliantly with the fruit tart, but that is not on the 2-bottle-per-day diet dessert. Anyways, that's what we had to drink with our friend Matt Lane from Torbreck. I'm your host, Andrew Lampasoni, signing off for the Wine Watch, saying remember, always drink the good stuff first.